We are live and ready to roll.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. We will now call to order the Riverside City Council work session for Thursday, August 10th, 2023. Would you please all join me to rise to allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Denning.
Here.
Mrs. Franklin.
Here.
Ms. Fry.
Here.
Mr. Joseph.
Yes.
Ms. Lomach.
Yes.
Mr. Maxfield. Mayor Williams.
Here.
Motion excused.
Second.
Maxwell.
We have a motion from Ms. Franklin and a second from Mr. Joseph to excuse Mr. Maxfield from tonight's meeting. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Mr. Manager, any additions or corrections to the agenda as presented?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion for Mr. Denning and a second for Mr. Joseph to approve the agenda as presented. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Agenda is approved, and we'll move right along to the work session items. And Mr. Manager, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have a handful of updates on several items to bring forward to council this evening. The first concerns stormwater. So let me go ahead and I'll pull up something to share on the screen, and I'll just briefly share this with the viewing audience as well. So I did want to let folks know it's been a little bit since we've talked about stormwater at a work session. Part of what's been going on in the background is that staff, particularly Ms. Bartlett, have been working with our engineering consultants, CMT, to prepare what you see here before you, which is a draft. I'll emphasize draft. It is not finished, but it's a draft stormwater policy manual. Our ordinance requires us to adopt a policy manual that explains basically how we're going to implement the stormwater utility fee. So inside this manual, there is a section that discusses basically the history of the utility fee, all the definitions. There is a section in here, I'll say it's a placeholder section that will speak to how the rate is calculated, what the service charges are, how folks can pay those, how we'll collect, how we'll assess if folks don't pay, late payments, and all of these other sort of key subject areas that folks will need to know and be aware of once we get around to collecting stormwater utility fee revenue. In particular, what I wanted to draw your attention to this evening and to let folks know that's something we've been working on is that in pretty much all of these policy manuals across the country, you'll see these similar policy manuals take various shapes and forms. But a number of times they'll discuss credits, appeals, ways that folks can take a look at their charge and then come to the city to ask for ways to adjust or amend those appeals, or excuse me, the amounts that they've been charged during the stormwater utility fee process. So I did want to illustrate that CMT has done an excellent job, I think, of looking at comparable processes, comparable utility manuals, and to develop a policy procedure here that provides that same recourse to our residents, to property owners in our community, so that if particularly for commercial properties, if you're a business owner and you take out part of your parking lot and put in trees or a detention basin, there is a mechanism in the ordinance in this manual where you can give us new engineering drawings and we'll look through that, validate it, and update the bill accordingly. So I just wanted to show off some of the work that they have done and to let you know that just to bring this forward to show again that while this is still in development, we continue to do this work in the background and to position ourselves, I think, really to take the next step forward later on this year and the beginning of next year. So just some quick thoughts on that. It's similar in a lot of ways to the income tax in the sense that once we have an idea about what the rate is, what that will mean in terms of what we're charging various parcels and what we are likely to collect, it will take some time to go through the billing for folks to pick how they want to be paying the bill, whether they want to be assessed. If a lot of folks choose to be assessed, then that creates a delay basically in when we'll see money because we'll have to send things off to the county. So we're very much in a year zero of a stormwater utility fee. So my intention at this point is basically to come to you all later on this year to have a conversation about the rate itself. So how do we want to set the billing tiers? What do we want the rate to look like? We'll take that information and then Ms. Llewellyn and I will work on a public engagement strategy and process that we will start to roll out as the year goes on or in early next year. And the other corollary there is that the timing, I think, is also dependent on some of the reorganization that we've been doing in-house here and some of the billing, or excuse me, some of the budgeting tools that in particular Ms. Baker has been helping to develop and get ramped up, I think are going to be really helpful for us in terms of telling the story about where money comes from and where it goes today and how that would apply to stormwater, where the money would come from and where it would go into a particular fund, how it would support capital. So as we kind of work toward onboarding that, the budgeting tools there, getting our reorganization underway and through some of the changes that we're likely to experience here later this year and have all that settled down, we'll be at a place to really hit the ground running early next year as far as kicking this off and starting the implementation process. So again, that's a lot of talking, but I did want to let you know that we continue to work on this and I would expect something to come forward to you again here November, December, as far as the next phase of this conversation. And I'm happy to answer any questions anybody has on stormwater.
So for the rain barrels, you say they have to submit engineer drawings?
Not necessarily for a rain barrel. So a lot of times in communities, you'll see where for a residential property owner, if you have a rain barrel or some way of mitigating runoff, communities will offer a credit up to a certain percentage or a certain dollar amount that says, we recognize that you contribute less runoff than you would if you didn't have this. But it's also important to remember that everyone who pays, all property owners that pay the stormwater utility fee, pay to support the entire stormwater network. So while your property generates runoff, your property also benefits from other properties that detain their runoff or from the fact that the stormwater infrastructure is there to protect your property too. So I am not familiar with any community, at least in my experience, that offers like 100% credit for, you know, a rain barrel or other infrastructure like that. But that is something that the policy manual will address.
I appreciate that, but my thing is like, how do we verify that somebody has installed a rain barrel or that they're using it? Because you can just install it, fills up 50 gallons, and then they just keep it there, and then you have 50 gallons of rainwater that's just stored, then you're still going to contribute the same amount. So
I see what you're saying. I think it really is. It's in that respect, it's similar to like a detention basin or something where, you know, as long as the infrastructure is in place, that's the level at which we verify that something at least is installed and in place on the parcel. That it's at least a step towards detention.
Holding the water is it so the runoff isn't as consistent as it might have been if the water wasn't being held. I mean, even if it's holding 50 gallons and then maybe it spills out weeks later, it's still mitigating the amount of water that is running into a specific direction, which causes the erosion. It's the volume. So if someone can reduce the volume as rain events occur, that does help the cause essentially.
Right.
If they use the water that is collected, because if it gets collected, say it rains one time and they hold the 50 gallons there, the rest of the time that it's going to rain, it's going to seep out of their downspout and just go back.
Right.
No doubt.
I mean, maybe I'm overthinking it, like I do a lot of things, but I'm just on, because if we set this up, one person comes in at one given point in time, I have a rain barrel. Do we ever go back and re-verify that, or do we just like blanket give them a 10% discount for?
Yeah, and again, that's not set in stone in this draft document. So that's something that we can continue to discuss. What I'm familiar with is a lot of times communities will offer, if they're going to offer some sort of a credit for like a rain barrel, that's not a perpetual thing. You would have to come in every year and say, I still have my rain barrel. Here's my picture, et cetera, et cetera. And then, you know, that credit gets assigned that way. So.
I just have used the example about parking lots. So I do have a question in regards to that. Are we looking at changing parking minimums to encourage businesses to maybe create more green space?
I know somebody would be happy to answer that question. Ms. Holt.
I mean, because I think that that would be, that would be a way to create more green space instead of having all these parking lots. I mean, if you're giving them a credit for,
That is definitely on the list
Okay.
of zoning updates, would be to reduce the parking minimums that we have in the code. Also looking to update our landscaping requirements because we even list an outdated landscape manual, so.
perfect, thanks.
And then just another note on that too, I think that applies even in a situation where a developer or a property owner couldn't eliminate a parking lot. If they were going to redo their parking lot and they put in a permeable parking lot or use pervious pavement, that reduces the stormwater utility fee because water can get through that pavement.
Got it.
So any alternatives to traditional asphalt also have impacts on stormwater and stormwater utility fee.
And diminishes pollution opportunities. If you have an entire huge parking lot, and I'll just pick on my church, St. Helens is an enormous parking lot and it rains, cars sit on it, maybe they drip oil. And then because there's nowhere for that water to go, naturally, it just goes into the stormwater. There's nowhere to soak it in. I would love for the St. Helens parking lot to have islands of greenery, islands of and to allow for, if we encouraged new developments and then current developments to rethink a parking lot with those, oases in the urban heat, that would have so many other benefits, not just mitigating stormwater runoff.
Slow down the traffic in the parking lot.
Maybe, I don't know. The St. Helens 500 every day when school gets out is it's hard to contain as we've witnessed. But it is, to Ms. Holt's point, updating our landscaping plans. It's a great thing. And it's not just going to help one aspect of what we do as a city. It's going to benefit multiple aspects. Other questions about stormwater? It's all been from this side. All right.
We're the heavy hitters today.
It rained a lot last night, so we're thinking about it.
Yeah, very
I
relevant.
was trying to fall asleep hearing that rain hit my roof and thinking, where's this water going
See,
to
I
go?
didn't even hear it at all. The only reason I knew it rained is because my grass was wet.
All right, so the second item is, we have it listed on the agenda as the US 35 and Woodman landscaping, and bear with me here while I pull up a map. All right, so as everyone I'm sure is very familiar with at this point, ODOT is continuing their work to realign the ramps and redo the bridge at 35 and Woodman. One of the things that's come up, I know from several sources, is some questions. I know we've had questions from the public, but also conversations among council members and among staff about what are some things maybe that we can do to think about landscaping once this project is said and done? Because my understanding is that the ODOT plan is to create this tight diamond pattern where you can see the roadway shifting here, which is going to leave quite a lot of green space area. And there's no firm landscaping plan called for as part of this construction project. So Ms. Bartlett, I know, has been working again with our consultants on trying to find some ways that we may be able to pay for landscaping improvements in this area. So CMT and actually MKSK, who did our land use plan, have been collaborating and have developed some of these preliminary thoughts. I'll call them design thoughts about things that we might be able to apply for using transportation alternatives TA grant funding. So this is, again, just food for thought. One of this first concept here would really put a lot of the emphasis on landscaping on the southwest corner. Currently, the ramp, kind of comes up really close to Linden and ends up dumping out onto Woodman about here. Once ODOT moves it, that'll free up all of this space. The idea being that it would be an ideal place to put, ornamental shrubs, and to grade it so that we are able, again, to detain stormwater in places where it needs to go while also keeping the intersection looking pretty. So this is kind of concept idea number one. They also did another rendering here just to show a different visual layout. Then this looks maybe a little more similar to something you might see down at Austin Landing or some of the other intersections that are along I-75. Both of these are high-level concept ideas that we would like to use as part of an application for TA grant funding. That application deadline is in October. So the current plan is for us to nail down what exactly this is likely to cost us, how much grant funding is available. The back of the napkin right now, I think is anywhere between $400,000 and $750,000 might be available for individual projects. We would have a 20% match. So our out-of-pocket expense could be, around $150,000, $200,000, even if we did get a grant. But in terms of thinking about what might be feasible to apply for, carrying that forward into a capital budget for next year and getting in line for some of this funding, I think the plan is for us to iron some of that out and then come to you in September at the September 21st meeting, I believe, to ask for permission to apply. So we will go ahead and probably finalize some of these concepts and then brief you and have that in front of you here in about a month and a half.
I just have a couple things. First of all, I noticed, because I know these are not your renderings, I assume they're ODOT's.
They're MKSKs.
MKs.
Yeah.
So what is this up in the trail connection? Why do they have that greened out?
I believe we would be able to leverage some of this funding in order to help also do a little bit of landscaping at that intersection point.
Well, you have to look at who owns the property. So anyway, that would be one of my questions, because the other thing is if you're looking at that, you're probably better off looking at this, well, because we're on Woodman.
Yeah,
Yeah, we're not on Spinning, because that's really where.
that should be that all should be right of way related to the bike Metro Parks. Thank you.
Metro Parks, and then, but both sides of that part of the trail are actually Dayton owned. But anyway, so there's that. The only question I would have is what does the sustainability look like on that? Because we have one that we put up by the school. And so that would be my only concern moving forward with it. I think it's a great idea. But I would like to know what that sustainability looks like to maintain that.
And that's a fair point. Because I believe that under the scope of this grant, anything that went in, we are likely to have to maintain. So, finding something that's as low maintenance but visually attractive as possible, I think is a goal that, I'd be interested in, to your point, fleshing out in more detail. So.
While we're on this subject, I've been approached about the fence line on 35 on the south side of 35 where the businesses are,
Mhm.
part of them that you see here. There's a fence line there and growth around and about that fence line as it go further on out 35 towards Beaver Creek. It's a lot of, and so who's maintaining the fence line?
My guess is that's the state because it's 35, but I'll verify. We can
Well,
look into that.
Yeah, because some of the businesses that are trying to make their backs of their businesses look more attractive are running into issues because the chain link fence line is in really bad shape and overgrown.
Yeah.
So,
We'll certainly pass that along
Do
too.
we know what the total acreage is on that?
I don't offhand. I don't know if it's buried down in here.
On both, if you include both sides or one side.
No, but I can find out.
Okay.
We maintain it unless the businesses maintain it themselves. So a lot of these businesses along that corridor.
Back in there.
Mhm.
Okay. No, that's fine. And we'll let service know and then we can run it down from there. So.
so the fence belongs to the city.
I got called into. I asked the service department. They want to maintain that. That's fine.
I need you to speak into the microphone.
I apologize.
So we put that fence up?
No, but we've been maintaining it.
Okay. Yeah, we may want to get an actual, we've been maintaining it, but
Mhm.
find out exactly who does, who put it up. Does anyone know?
It's been there ever since I
Yeah,
lived here,
so-
so.
Yeah.
That may be something moving forward to. find
Yeah,
out.
we'll get to the bottom of it either way and make sure that we get,
Well, it's just that
if we
those-
do it, we'll do it. If the state does it, we'll ask the state to do it.
Yeah, those
So-
businesses that are more interested with the new work going on at the intersection, they're interested in upgrading the backs of their businesses to not look as bad as we all know they have.
Cuts.
Thank you for
Mhm.
doing this. This is,
This is
I'm
the state. So,
would like to know, On the north side of that intersection, it appears to be nothing, but we're gonna continue to just let the wild things grow, huh?
Well, there's the
Go
bike
ahead.
path is the
Yeah.
bike.
I know the
the-
back path's there, but
Well, the other thing is the grade over there is very, very steep.
Yeah.
So it's really difficult to get anything in there to maintain or otherwise. I know we have challenges right now with stormwater runoff where it comes through where the ramp is now and it just sheets down the embankments and gets into the neighborhood back in there too. So
Well, if there's also a stormwater drain back there.
Right.
There's a big one that runs underneath the highway there. But yeah, to your point, that it's just straight up and down. There's lots of trees.
yeah, it's a pretty steep grade. So
And so right now, ODOT maintains that area.
no.
well, when you say that area,
He's talking about the exit ramp going eastbound on the southwest corner of your map, where all the nice greenery is. Currently, it's a lot wider, as you said. It's not.
oh,
a tight enough-
understood. Yeah.
Yeah, ramp. Pardon me. But currently ODOT cuts that grass for the most part,
think so.
or do we?
I
think that's why we have a
I think we've been out there
Yeah.
at least once or twice. I know
It's not
that
more
it
than once or
gets
twice though, because it's all grass.
well, it gets hairier when you get up into other parts of this.
Yeah.
Outside of this, that's why I asked, because up in where these other on ramps are, that also overlays in the metro parks right of way for the ramps for the trails, and so technically they're supposed to be taking care of parts of it, and there's many layers at work there.
Hmm.
But yeah.
I understand on that north side too, between the ramp and the bike path, that's all utility. So they'll come out every couple of years and clear it all completely down and then they just let it grow back up.
But I believe, to your point, Mayor, I believe we are out here mowing in the same way that we would have to take care of any landscape that's there that would go in. We have some responsibilities out here, I believe, as well for grass and everything else. But I can verify that too with Kathy. So
My thought is, I know there's a lot of green space there, but think about with the Austin Landing, like you referenced. If you make it less for us to maintain and mow by adding more landscape that doesn't require us to mow.
Yeah,
mulch,
hardscape.
Hardscape. Yeah, we have the initial upfront cost of installing it if we get the grant, but also, cost retention long-term, because I remember a year ago, we were debating mowing once a month or every 2 weeks, different parcels we were gonna mow less frequently because we didn't have the staff or the money or the manpower to do so. So this is obviously adding more area in that intersection for us to mow and maintain. So I think it would make sense to me to have that more of a hardscaped area versus grass.
well, I certainly understand that point too. Kathy actually just emailed me, Miss Bartlett, excuse me, just emailed me 'cause she's watching and said we do maintain it. So, that point is well taken. I think part of the balance and maybe one of the factors that is part of the grant planning process, though, is a lot of times in these grants, they will look for ways to avoid more impervious area or more runoff. And so I think sometimes, and we will verify. But again, I think I hear what you're saying, which is about striking that balance between what's the level of effort that needs to go in to maintain it versus the sort of the visual appeal and the effort it takes to get it installed and taken care of. So we will continue to flesh those out.
So with respect to what you hope for us to recommend on the 21st of September, do we, the 7 of us, need to have consensus on design style, or is this more of giving you the ability to move forward and see what's out there as far as grants go? And then maybe we'll be presented with some options on what we could afford and what we could sustain and what the best recommendations of staff is.
I believe all we need at the meeting in September is permission to apply for the grant. I don't believe at that point in time, we're locked into any one particular design. What they'll do is give us, assuming that we get an award, then I would imagine we have some opportunity to finalize a design that will work based on the budget that we outlined as part of the grant planning process. And if that changes, we'll certainly update you and let you know.
All right. Other questions about the 35 landscaping? All right, we'll move along.
Next on the agenda, we will pivot. I will actually turn it over to Ms. Holt for an update on a rezoning request.
Good evening. At the July Planning Commission recommended a rezoning for a property off of Fairfax. It is made up of 11 parcels. I'll let the city manager pull that up just to give you a visual. But only 6 of those parcels are in that rezoning request. They are. Just gonna talk a little slowly, just to.
No, you're good. It's over off of
Springfield Street.
Springfield Street.
Yes, is the frontage, but the parcels for rezoning are towards the rear of the site. They need to rezone because the front is B2, but the back is R3, and they are proposing a 1-story office building. They are MSD, you know, their presence, they are around here all the time, but their main building is in the city of Dayton. They are expanding into Riverside and moving their administrative offices to our city, leaving the main component where they have all of their service workers in the industrial side of their operations remaining in the city of Dayton. Well, as you can see, the 6 parcels to the rear, those are going to be the ones in the rezoning.
I think that's a layer on here, if I'm
Yeah.
not mistaken.
Public.
If I understood you correctly, you're saying part of it is already
Yes,
B1, but then the.
the 5 parcels to the front. Going from 4406 to that one, yes. That's where the cursor is.
Okay.
That's also part of the project.
Where's the-
And this is off of Springfield Street.
So in essence, MSD has
Building.
acquired,
Mhm.
they've already acquired,
Yes.
correct? They've acquired these parcels that front Springfield Street. They've also acquired these parcels here in the back. The parcels that front Springfield Street are already zoned appropriately for what they want to do, but in order to build the office building that they're looking to build, it would require the rezoning of these parcels to B2.
Yes, that's right.
And planning commission recommended
Approval.
approval, yeah.
So they're looking at a 26,000 square foot building.
But the 4 in green, this map says that's Dayton, right?
No, it's across the street. That's Dayton.
Yep.
Yeah, their building right there is Dayton.
But, oh, so 15, 14, 23, and 24 aren't Dayton?
No, that's R, and that's the R3
This side
district,
is Riverside.
residential.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
what I see.
Yeah, so.
Oh.
Yeah,
so
and they're
it's the-
industrial across the street.
It's not Riverside Blue,
Yeah.
Dayton Green, it's
Mhm.
just B,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
okay,
So this is zoning for the entire county that the map.
that
has.
makes sense.
Josh, can I ask a quick favor?
Mhm.
Since you're on the county map,
Sure.
can you can you go over to the legend and go to advanced?
Oh, Pete's pulling up the advanced setting.
Oh, is that,
Yeah.
It'll be a very old thing
oh,
though,
there it is.
right there. And can you please click on recorded plat? And could you clear out the zoning,
Yes, apologies.
please? The one thing that was discussed at the planning commission meeting that is very clear here. And I think when you look, we can click back over to the zoning map in a minute, but the light green in the middle, at one time, there was essentially a railroad, an interurban that ran directly behind the properties on Springfield Street. It went from North Smithville to all the way to North Cliff. And that is an abandoned right of way currently. Now, all of it's returned back to backyard and parking lot. It's clearly not a rail line anymore. But when you click back over to the zoning map, you see that at one time, and there's still remnants of this, much of Springfield Street had commercial on the street frontage and then residential on the south side of the railroad right of way. So if you look at parcels 13, 14,
This would be the railroad, right?
16, 17, if we just continue what was already starting on both sides, I think that it's, in my mind, it's pretty easy to visualize that this is not a huge leap to go business for these couple parcels. And in fact, at one time, this was a different use. And I think the intent was to have a more business feel along Springfield Street and more residential back on the Byesville side. And as you zoom out, you see the entire roadway, or what was once the rail line. It's pretty clear. And Josh, if you quickly could go back to the one we were just on, which is the recorded plat, you passed it. Oh, he's going back up. So you can see the light green cuts all the way across. That was the rail line. So I think that there's a clear separation in this neighborhood between main street frontage and residential street living, essentially.
So can you sit back in? So, but they're trying, the lots we're talking about is 13, 14, 24, 15, and 23, correct?
No, we're talking
I
about the
believe so,
ones.
yes.
Yeah.
Should be the 6 of these.
Yeah.
We're
13,
talking about
14, correct?
23, 15, 24, 14,
Oh.
13, and 14.
14.
Yeah.
Yep,
Okay.
these 6.
There's 6 lots.
And then the lot behind that, is it zone residential? Is it owned by, I mean,
That is also zone residential.
15.
that's interesting.
Something to also keep in mind, should you vote to approve this rezoning, this is just, would be first step, they would have to come back for a site plan. There are landscape requirements, there's stormwater requirements, there's setback requirements, there's still a full review that would have to happen. So, and this is in source water protection, they have to abide by our
Flood thing.
overlay, yes, it's
Mhm.
also in
And
the flood.
It's in the
zone.
flood zone.
So there's also some other layers of review that have to happen and they have to abide by.
This neighborhood, maybe more than any other we have, has a lot of these chopped up parcels and
Yes,
and kind of orphan lots. And it's not nearly as clean cut as you might find in like the Bayside plat, where it's all laid out in a very more systematic way. But this neighborhood's also 101 years old.
And can you, and apologies if you did this already, can you touch briefly on encouraging the developer to reach out?
yes, I have had a conversation with the developer. They have shared an elevation and I've talked to them about having a neighborhood meeting and a conversation with the community. I don't have a date or anything about that, but they are open to doing that and setting up a meeting to talk about the project with the neighbors and having a discussion about the project in their own words.
And there was a good amount of residents that attended the planning commission meeting, and we're happy to continue those discussions with them and hear
Yes,
what their concerns are and make sure that they know, kind of the other side of the story, which is what Nye just laid out, that even if this was to be rezoned, there's still a lot to go between now and completion. And we're not by any means just tossing the keys to these folks. So there's a lot of other things that have to be discussed and made clear and standards met. Other questions about the potential rezoning on Fairfield?
It's an office building.
Yeah, they're right across the
It's
street on the other side.
essentially their employee headquarters, for lack of a better
Yes.
term,
Mhm.
right, for the offices. So,
70 to 80 employees would be moving to this space.
yeah, the initial request was to actually rezone all this industrial, if I'm not
That's
mistaken.
correct,
And we pushed back pretty hard on that because it would kind of be, I don't want to steal your thunder.
No,
but
it would not align with the adopted land use plan.
it's also a little bit spotty, right? Because we don't have any industrial around there.
Nope.
So anyway.
That's all in Dayton, not in Riverside.
Okay, well, thank you for the update and thank you, Josh, for the quick work on the map. Yeah, no kidding. And then we're moving on to Pro Champs.
Pro champs, Ms. Holtz.
Yes, there were some sudden changes with ProChamps and they are
You're
no
very
longer an active business. So we will need to make some changes on our end as well. we've had some conversations with Dalma and our legal team. And in order to make those changes, we need to do some changes with our code. And then we can put out an RFP to find a new vendor so we can register vacant property and foreclosed properties again. So this will take a little longer than we expected, but we will get back with you when we are ready. So that is the steps we need to take. Yes.
I don't know if everyone's up to speed, and Josh, I'll let you expand, but ProChamps basically went out of business.
Yes, without any notification to us.
Yes.
We had their competitors reaching out, letting
Yes.
us
Had a
know.
flood of,
That's how I found out.
yeah.
Right.
LinkedIn message.
And then we have had some folks asking how they can register their,
Mhm.
and to their credit, folks asking how they can register their properties now
Try to
that our registrant is no longer operational. So we're working through those challenges, but as Ms. Holt suggested, I think in addition to the code changes that are necessary, and I believe that some of that is due to recent laws that were passed by the legislature, but there's also an opportunity here, I think, to look at how to connect vacant and foreclosed properties. A lot of times, those are also rental properties. So there are intersections here with our rental ordinance that we're looking at, and we're trying to do a pretty thorough examination of the existing code so we can, like other code changes, bring you a solution that solves hopefully several problems in one go, does some code cleanup. So
Mhm. You know, you looked at this in 2020, 2021. So we want to do it right this time. So you don't have to come looking at it in another 2 years.
Well, this is no fault of staff.
no, it's our provider went out of business,
Yes.
and we have the opportunity to clean up
Mhm.
the code and find a new provider that can do more than what was being done for us in the past. So it's
Yeah.
more of a seizing an opportunity than anything else. So
Any questions about ProChamps? Okay, well, we'll move on.
next, Ms. Holt, we'll talk a little bit about the Housing Council. You're good.
So as we've mentioned earlier this year, we've had some inquiries about CRAs. We've talked about what they are, the current CRA areas. Planning Commission has actually appointed one member to the CRA Council. So I'm going to talk to you more about what that looks like. The mayor appoints 2 members to the CRA Council, and the council at large appoints 2 additional members. Once that CRA Council is assembled, then they would appoint 2 residents at large to make the full 7 council body. So that's just it in a nutshell. And you have a whole layout here. The zoning administrator would be the staff guide to that body. And I can answer any questions that you have. Now, there was one thing I did find out. Those 2 members that are appointed by the mayor and the additional 2 members that are appointed by the council do not have to be residents. I did find that.
So can you talk a little bit about, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
I was just saying, can you talk a little bit about what the purpose and role of the Housing Council is, just for the viewing public
Of
too?
course, yeah. This council is to look at the applications that we receive and make sure that they are in line with the direction that the city wants to go in, and that they are at a state that we do want to give an incentive to. They also give us a way to, I'll say, negotiate, go back and forth with the developer, but they are a starting point for that conversation.
So basically, if anyone were to approach the city with a development and ask for a CRA incentive as part of that development, this body reviews and
Yes,
recommends.
That's correct. Yeah.
It's not the ultimate arbiter of that decision, correct?
No,
The
no.
recommendation comes to council.
Mhm.
Yep.
They would make that recommendation.
So I think the seed that we're trying to plant with everyone today is that the planning commission has already made their appointment. I believe it's Mr. Owens to the Housing Council. We would like to kind of start a conversation, at least again, plant the seed as far as having council identify some folks who may be a good fit for this body, as well as the mayor. I don't anticipate that this is a heavy lift for anybody that gets named. You know, we have not historically at least had a whole lot of requests for CRA incentives. But nevertheless, I think just it's prudent for us to be prepared to have folks in line in case something comes down the pike where we can have that request be heard and then a recommendation be made to council in a timely manner and go from there. And as Ms. Holt stated too, the residency requirements for the mayor and council appointees, there is not one.
There is
Is that
not.
correct? Okay. So again, just wanted to basically start the conversation and kick off the concept. If there are folks that you believe would make a good fit, the way we would go about appointing them is similar to how we appoint other board and commissions. It would just be a motion at a council meeting recommending a letter of appointment to whoever council decides. And so if you'd like to talk about it now, you certainly can. We can.
Member of staff.
Can I have Naya twice? I'm calling it now.
Double-
if
double
Everybody else
vote.
can.
Yeah, two votes.
My two, though.
Your two?
I have two appointments, Naya and Naya. So,
Right, and her vote just counts twice.
yeah,
That's a good question about staff. Did we get clarification by any chance from Dalma on that? We can
did not.
ask.
I did not ask that.
Okay, so we'll clarify that.
I
and
did
let you
see that
know.
it says zoning administrators, a staff member on,
Yeah, sure.
is that instead of the community development director?
It's in the ordinance.
It's in the ordinance. Okay, fair enough. I appreciate the clarification. It would be great to know if staff can serve at the appointment of council or the mayor.
And if their vote can count twice.
We will find that out. I doubt on the vote twice thing, but.
Oh, well, so to Josh's point, I think that while it is something that we at times struggle with finding folks to fill boards, this is not a heavy lift. And I do think these are going to be timely and important conversations in our community. So I would certainly love to hear any input that anyone else has, whether it's tonight or in the next. I mean, we kind of have to get moving on this. Is that a good way to describe it?
Yeah, I think we have some wiggle room where we could bring it up at the next work session. I believe that's September 14th for discussion then as well. I mean, ideally, if there are folks waiting in the wings that you all are eager to nominate, I'd love to have a motion at next week's meeting. If we need more time, then I think we could push, have a follow-up conversation at the next work session and then try to have a motion at the September 21st meeting. I think we don't have anything that I'm aware of that is that would conflict with that timeline. So.
Okay. Any thoughts or conversation for anybody, or kind of gives us all homework, I think. All right, we will move into the class comp study, or the class comp policy. I apologize, which will talk about the study while we're talking about policy.
Okay, so just to really quick read back on the last item, what I heard is if we as staff get any nominations between now and next week's meeting and we have enough for a motion, I'll go ahead and probably bring it up and ask for it at the meeting. If that does not happen, I will plan on bringing this up in September at the work session.
That's it.
Okay. Cool.
Okay, so
Thank you.
we're all going to start thinking.
All right, so compensation policy. So as many folks know, we engaged Clemens Nelson, a industry leader in terms of compensation and personnel matters, to assist us with a classification and compensation study earlier in the year. And that work has been ongoing now for several months. We do not yet have a final deliverable from Clemens Nelson. We are working on that, and I'm hopeful that we will have it by the end of the month. Having said that, the initial work as far as the benchmarking that's gone into this and the preliminary recommendations that Clemens Nelson has been working on prompted us as staff to try to get a head start on a piece of the implementation of this. That is to say, Clemens will recommend that we adopt what's commonly called a compensation philosophy, which is essentially a policy statement by the governing body that tries to describe how the city wants to pay its employees, or will strive to pay its employees. These take all kinds of different shapes and forms all across the country and across the industry. But again, the main idea is that it lays out the core principles that inform how we're going to pay our staff. So again, this is very much a draft document. And I'll go ahead and throw it up on the screen here as well. But the main idea is that we've gone ahead and drafted a policy for the council to consider that identifies key drivers for how we want to pay staff, meaning we will strive to be market competitive, to pay folks equitably inside the organization, and to be as transparent as possible with how our compensation is calculated and assigned to folks. The second part of this policy addresses the recommended pay grades that have been identified by Clemens Nelson. So there's a draft table in here that illustrates, rather than the old system, which used a table of organization that sort of aligned ranges to titles, the idea here is we have a table that has 10 grades in it that has a range of salaries, and the structure of this table is informed by industry best practice as far as how local governments tend to pay, where there's about a 12% break from grade to grade, and each range is about 40% wide, and that's consistent through the entire table. It gets us away from past practice where things were a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B, and maybe not quite consistent among the different pay ranges. So adopting this table then provides the city with a framework to assign jobs to different pay grades and then again pay at a market rate. Another important policy statement has to do with compression. One of the things that I have noticed in my tenure here is that we've had a number of policies and practices, I think, that were well-intentioned and tried to address compression issues. A lot of times in compression, though, you may try to fix a problem here and it creates a problem somewhere else. That's common across all class comp systems. But one of the recommendations that's come out of, or that will come out of this report, is that we tried to create some sort of a break between the highest level union paid positions and the positions that are non-union that supervise them. So in our context, that's like the majors, the battalion chiefs, and any other position we may create that would directly supervise union personnel. So as a policy, the way this is drafted is that we would look to try to pay at least 12% higher to those supervisors than the employees that they supervise. And that 12% is consistent with the pay grades that we just reviewed as well. The idea there is to keep the supervisors above union pay so that there's incentive to move up through the organization, creates a succession plan, and then also creates that stability going forward to where, as the union folks have their COLAs and other increases that get negotiated, it would apply automatically then to their supervisors as well. Another piece involves COLA adjustments, cost of living adjustments. So the policy as drafted essentially says that the city will look to pay COLA adjustments to non-union staff that are commensurate or roughly in line with whatever union staff have negotiated. And that's deliberate in the sense that the unions, I think, have the ability to leverage the bargaining process every 3 years to talk about these issues. Non-union staff don't have that ability, and that's part of the reason why there's been the need to do a study like this for quite a while. A lot of non-union folks are not currently paid at a market rate. And so that's a key distinction, I think, that sort of drives the COLA statement here, is to try to set that range for non-union staff so that we prevent getting too far apart and paying below a market rate going forward in the future. And then just to wrap up, so we would anticipate reviewing, or by policy, we would be required to revisit this every few years to make sure that the pay ranges are not out of sync with market, not too far ahead, not too far behind, and to make adjustments where necessary. And the final, and I think in some ways most important piece, is that the policy is really designed to comply with the law and not to overspend a budget. So while we have talked about all these things that we will strive to do, we will only do those things insofar as we can be fiscally sustainable. So if that means that in some years revenues aren't there and the COLAs have to be lower, then that's what that means, because the first priority is fiscal stability. And then we get to these other elements as we're able to as well. So again, very much a draft document, but in line with the early recommendations that Clemens has communicated to us. And I think the overall idea is that we would like to have council consider and adopt that policy ideally at the next meeting, if possible, if only because if the policy is adopted at that point, it creates a natural way for us to begin an implementation process. I'm hopeful that we will have the executive summary from Clemens. It's certainly by the end of the month, but hopefully before the next council meeting, and that we can effectively get started on trying to roll the implementation side of things out under that policy guidance. But wanted to open, I know that's a lot to throw at you, and I will certainly ensure that you all have a copy of that draft too, so that you can look through it and provide comments as well. But I am open to any other comments or thoughts you may have at this juncture.
You know, the labor contracts gonna start negotiating.
Those are effectively in process. So we started with CWA this week. And then sergeants and officers, I believe, are due by the end of the year, and fire is due by the middle of next. So we'll be
You need to get this. in
working
place.
through. Right, and that's part of an ongoing conversation with each of those units as well, too. So
One thing I was thinking of, first off, I want to say thank you for meeting with me earlier today, and I'm sure the rest of council appreciates that too, because I would sit here and make this meeting 5 hours long, because this is my jam. One thing I thought
I gotta
about-
talk about maps earlier, so you take all the time you want, buddy.
With a compensation philosophy, and we talked about this, but I think it might make sense to potentially bake it into the document, is the number with a dollar sign on the bottom right-hand column of your check that you get is not a total picture of what compensation means. So when you think about how you're compensated, it's benefits. So I think the number 1.45% for Medicare, 14% for OPERS, so 15.45% on every dollar. We're matching as a city. The employer portions of health insurance, the hours in a year that you don't have to show up to work, but you get paid anyway for PTO, sick, that those types of benefits. So just as a compensation philosophy, like that the city strives to give like commensurate benefits or something along those lines, and like an equitable PTO policy or something along those lines. So it doesn't, like a compensation philosophy doesn't just tie into gross to net dollars, but also ties into like what shows up on your check simulator or your total compensation view when you look at that online. So just a thought, if anyone else agrees. Mueller.
You want that in the package, in the
Yeah, just like a statement of the beyond like
The full column.
dollars that get sent, like given out.
yeah, and I think kind of like we had talked about, I think there's an opportunity for us especially when we get to implementation, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, where when we send non-union folks documentation, a letter that basically says, here's how this impacts your position.
Well, I understand like to the employee, but just for it to be in the general I don't know that it's needed, but I think that the person you're hiring should be able to see what that compensation
Mhm.
looks like. But I don't know that it has to be in this particular thing, but that's just.
And it goes into a philosophy of compensation, because we could just like decide that we don't want to pay as much in health insurance benefits, or we want to lower our benefits offering. And that plays a major portion to a total compensation package.
So I think that there's value in including it in the policy, but the question that I have is, are we prepared to state what that policy would be in reference to benefits?
I mean, it's just,
We've done work for the salary, but are we in a position where we could?
I mean, we're going to be in the OBWC, right? The BWC.
Well, we're part of the OBC, but let me back up and just clarify. Is what you're asking for some language in the policy that just says that you
We'll
know,
give good benefits.
that we will try to be as competitive on benefits as possible, something like that.
We give good benefits.
Okay, well,
Period.
Or maybe something that says this is not complete compensation,
right.
you know,
Right,
a
right.
complete compensation story is.
I guess that's my thing. I can understand putting something like that in there. I just don't know that we have to put numbers with it.
Not
Well, we really
numbers.
can't because there's other people,
Right.
like, there are non-union people that actually contribute to OPNF and we match more than OPERS. And then also, if you were to talk about things that could be available other places might pick up pension, for instance, instead of, you know, them paying their own 10%. So there's all kinds of different things to talk about. And I don't know if we want to be very specific because then we're stuck.
I
with it.
wouldn't be. I would just a compensate benefits package, just like we said, like we're gonna do an analysis on what we're paying for wages. I think it also makes sense to do an analysis on the beyond gross wage piece of it.
Why don't you and I talk?
Okay.
I think that, I see where you're coming from. And I think there's probably a way to craft some language that speaks to that about, you know, how we strive to be as competitive as possible on benefits without trying to, I know you're not talking about putting numbers to it, but I wouldn't want anybody listening or reading the policy either to think that we're going to try necessarily to index benefits in the same way, because that's a much more complicated conversation. And it's also not, well, it's just, there's a lot behind a benefits discussion as opposed to just wages and salaries. So let's try to wordsmith something and then we can get that to council and throw something in the draft policy document and go from there. So.
Thanks.
Other questions about the class comp policy?
Thank you for all the work that you put into it. This is very, very thoughtful.
Yeah,
document.
it reads great and there's some comprehension. Now when people come in, this is policy.
Makes.
Not
sense.
like, oh, Susie over here gets this, Johnny over here gets this. Oh, I like this person this week, so they get that.
Yes, I'm excited to get
Yes,
to a place that's more consistent.
Thank you.
So,
More consistent.
I'm sure payroll is too.
or maybe just consistent.
Or maybe,
And actually, I will give Miss Davis a lot of credit for that. She was the one who pulled the draft of that policy together and brings a wealth of expertise to this conversation. So kudos to her.
all right. Okay, well then we'll move on to the final work session item, and I believe you're handing it off, Mr. Manager.
I am once again to the venerable Miss Katie Llewellyn, our city clerk, for a discussion about charter review,
And I will bring my expertise to the conversation.
which again is venerable.
Venerable, laudable.
I don't know. I was on charter review with you.
And I will be
just missed it.
introducing that shortly, about page 14 of my presentation.
We'll get to
So,
that about a half an hour.
Page 4.
35 minutes, I timed it.
There's. 4.
Okay. You could go ahead and we all know what that says. This pretty much just goes over the purpose in section 13.04 of the Riverside Charter, that this is something that gets reviewed every 5 years, beginning in January 99, and every 5 years since then. Come on, Josh. I pretty much just want to present you a timeline of what we're expecting. This is really a broad overview. We are looking now, as we did in 2018, September to December, to find resident electors that are interested in serving and to share that this is an important and short-term commission. By January, you need to appoint. So we hopefully will have the 9 names, 7 electors, and then 2 alternates. February to April, we set up the meetings. The charter has 14 sections. The first 3 don't even need to be reviewed because that's literally like the stone of our charter. We're not going to change anything out of there. They're very small, basic sections. So we have about 11 sections and they get broken up over roughly 6 meetings. The last time we did it in 2019, it came down actually to 6 meetings. With one of those being an overview, a review. In 2019, they brought those to council. Any recommendations? They brought you 5 last time, 4 of which you approved to put on the ballot, and all 4 of those did end up passing. Charter review just makes a recommendation. You guys will choose, if anything, will go on the ballot. That evening, usually in June at a council meeting, we try to have the chair of the Charter Review Commission and as many members possible come so that they can kind of do a small presentation on what they reviewed, what they recommend, and to be able to answer any questions that you all may have. Then, of course, you will vote on what goes on the ballot, and then the clerk takes over, making sure that gets on the ballot with the proper language and working with the Board of Elections. And by August, we do another resolution to dismiss the commission. So this is kind of it. Actually, you can do the next slide. In a nutshell. The
Nice bus.
commission is led. Thank you. The commission is led by myself and legal counsel. And legal counsel at the first meeting does provide the oath to all the members. So they do take an oath.
So you're saying they won't have to put up with me?
You can attend if you like.
I'm just kidding.
But we kind of wanted this out there. Miss April, before she was on council, she served on the Charter Review Commission. So she could probably give you any information if you had questions. But we would like to really kind of maybe while you're thinking about housing council, think about people that you might want to approach and ask them, because this is kind of an important deal. So anything that changes in the charter does have to go in front of the electors.
So I'll add to it. I did sit on the council the last time, or the group, and it was really informative. You do learn a lot of stuff. The only suggestion that I kind of seen when it started is council approves what goes on the ballot. And so one of my recommendations is, and I'm not sure if they can do it or not, Katie can check into that, is that maybe if there's some things that council has noticed in the charter, maybe it reads funny, or you'd like to see some improvements, maybe come into, and somebody, from council could come in and say, we've noticed these things, you may want to take a look at them. And then they can look at them and see if they want to make some changes to them or not. Because sometimes when you're in this body, you're thinking to yourself, well, what does council want? I mean, what's council going to approve? And when you put so much work into something, if you come out with 5 recommendations and council doesn't approve any of them, it's a lot of work. And so I think that if someone within council, wants to at least maybe attend one night, if there's, a group of us during a work session, we discuss and say, hey, these things read funny, or, can we have the commission look at it? I think that would be really helpful to them. And then they kind of know where you're going to with this. So that would be my only recommendation, if it's allowed. I think it is.
You have to remember, Charter Review Commission happens once every 5 years. Council can make any adjustment they want at any time that can go on the ballot.
Correct.
You don't need a charter review to do that. If you all in agreement want something changed, you don't have to wait every 5 years.
But I think that since this is coming up, it's an opportunity. If
It
there's
is.
something that one of council has seen or want to change, that you could bring it to the commission and say, hey, this is, something we'd like to see changed or reworded, or however, so it's more clear, better understanding. I think it's a great opportunity to do it at this point.
We were able to do that last time. In fact, one of the sections actually got deleted. So
Yes.
because it just didn't have any good purpose. But other than that, yeah. No, it was, and everyone attended every meeting. First meeting will be covering section 4, which is all about council. So that's probably a good meeting to attend. That's all I have this evening.
Well, I did that at one time and it's a lot of work.
I know.
So it has to be somebody who's willing to put in the time.
Well, and I think it's informative.
Exactly. You learn a lot.
You
Yeah.
learn a lot. I found it I found it interesting. And the body that I sat with, everyone was, we were all over this, spectrum, and it was really kind of a growth for a lot of us. And to be able to, hash out the decisions and the conversations that happen. I met some great people and I learned a lot.
So I would like to suggest, if anyone's out there that has an interest in let one of the council members know, or the city manager.
The clerk.
or the
Actually,
clerk.
they can go online
Yeah,
under boards and commissions and fill out that form and send it in and just type in charter review.
Yeah.
It is very short term, appointment by January, last meeting typically by April, a presentation to council by June. It is not a lot of,
so I would encourage people out there that are willing to give the city some time and to learn more about their city to volunteer. Makes our job much easier.
And is there a possibility, because you created that PowerPoint slide, to maybe possibly just get that out on our city page?
I'm sure we can figure something out.
Well, you put it
Yes.
on, you put it on our feed and it will go through each picture. Our storyline. There we go.
Yes,
Our
that's
storyline.
absolutely a conversation that I think the clerk and I can have. Well,
And since it's been created already, you know, it looks good. It gives people an understanding of what that timeline looks like, what the deadline is and what's expected.
I told her it was the best looking presentation of the night, so I think you're right. And yes, we will absolutely put it out.
three of those
I
four
mean,
photos were
we
taken
made
today.
I saw her take it.
BZA is still looking for a member.
Yeah.
They are,
Good pictures.
yeah.
Well, I
we
mean,
need,
yeah, we need a lot
we need votes.
across the board.
And the last slide put first,
This is it. in
With
a
the bus?
nutshell.
to catch their attention.
I will say though, if anybody on council has suggestions for either charter review committee or for housing council, feel free to email me, email the clerk. We will sort that out and make sure that we get names organized and are prepared for the next conversation that happens for those.
Doesn't mean
So-
they couldn't do both.
Correct,
If
yes.
somebody's
Right.
interested in doing both, one's long-term, one's short-term, so. Because by the time you get the CRA going, this might be,
Yep. I only had one other item under city manager report.
Updates.
And I'll be very, well, hopefully pretty brief. So the state, I emailed council about this earlier in the week, but the state has finalized grant awards. The state used some ARP money to create public safety retention grants. We applied for those grants earlier in the year. The state notified us earlier this week that we would receive awards under those grants. We have a bit of a late ad in the sense that we'll have a resolution in front of you next week accepting that grant award so that we can work through the mechanics of how we're going to calculate and pay the award to employees who are eligible. So very exciting news, but just wanted to let you know that that'll be in your packet next week, and we'll ask you to let us accept some free money on behalf of our public safety responders. And many thanks to all of them for all the work they do as well.
And that's like 200K plus, right?
Correct.
Wonderful.
That's all I have.
All right, we'll move right along to council member comments. Miss Franklin,
I have nothing.
Mr. Joseph.
To the 4,000 people who turned out to vote on Tuesday here in the city, thank you. Surprising turnout numbers
Mhm.
for an August election. So that's awesome. We have some civic engagement going on. Other than that, I got nothing.
I think it was 4 times the last August
Yeah.
election in Ohio.
Mhm.
So, I would agree with Zach that it's great that there was people taking part in the democracy that we are a part of. And, whether you voted in one way or another, I was really happy to see that the next day, in my mind, at least, next day, when you move along with business and you continue to improve your little corner of the world, or in our case, we're improving our city, and another election coming right around the corner. And I'm hoping that the levels of engagement that we saw on Tuesday can translate into a lot of the things that we just talked about as a body, that it's great that you vote. All right, great. But there's a tremendous opportunity for people to have a large impact on our city of 25,000 people. And all you got to do is get a hold of us. So,
With that, I'll also add a hello to the 6 people watching on YouTube right now. Hi.
whoa,
How
we
are you?
tripled where we were at the beginning. It was 2 and you were one of them.
I
Are you
know.
still one of them?
No,
Okay.
so 6. Kathy's one of them. Austin's one. I don't know who the other
Okay.
4 people. I can. track
Somebody
down.
did, yeah. Somebody asked about stormwater and emailed about
Tom,
that while
maybe?
we were talking about it. So it's probably, that's great.
So I think I know like half of who's watching. The other 3, if I don't know you, hello. Thank you. for watching.
Volunteer for a charter review. Miss Lomatch?
Yes, I just would like, it on the record. I just was reappointed by the Montgomery County Commissioners to, the Fair Housing Board. I've been on it for a number of years and I just got reappointed for another term.
Congratulations. Great representation for the county from our city. Ms. Fry,
We have another blood drive. Our August blood drive is on the 21st. That's a Monday from 3 to 7 p.m. If you would like to register ahead of time, the registration is donortime.com. Search for the city of Riverside. Summer is always a difficult time for blood collection because a lot of people are taking vacations. So right now will be a really great time if you're a first-time donor or you haven't donated in a while. We could really use the support.
You
Thank
can get in a drawing for Bengals tickets.
Yes, Bengals tickets.
Yes.
Yeah. And then there's always a free t-shirt.
Yeah. I'm gonna win the Bengals tickets.
and Mr. Denning.
I don't have anything other than the farmer's market is going well.
Yes.
And hope to see everybody out there. We're getting more vendors every week, so it's pretty encouraging. The JC's just kind of, for no better word, threw that together real quick because people were asking for it. And now we're asking them to support it, support the vendors that are coming out, so that we can keep it going.
Can you just add the location?
It's at 1213 Old Harshman,
Saturdays from 1 to
1:30 to 3:30.
1:30 to 3:30. Well,
And
thank you to the
actually,
JCs.
Most of it is 2 to 3, but we try and get people to be there 1:30 to 3:30.
Mhm.
And if the idea is if this grows, then eventually we would like to possibly add food trucks. But we have to have enough people coming out to warrant making that asking somebody to come out and put their time in.
Yeah, well, you're doing it the right way and that's great. And
And it's not just produce. There are homemade, there's a girl that does dried flowers, and she grows in her backyard and she does some flowers. There was a tumbler and some handmade items. So think of a miniature Second Street Market. That's
All right.
Well, that's our vision.
excellent. Well, again, thanks to the JCs.
Can I add one thing? please?
Certainly.
Yeah, tomorrow is the packing day for the school supplies for Mad River Schools. And there's been a plea put out this week for scissors. I can't answer why, but I went out and bought some more scissors, kid-size scissors, not
Mhm.
surgical scissors.
Not sewing shears?
Yeah, and so anything that you might be willing to donate towards the kids' backpacks that they will be packing tomorrow can be delivered to the school board offices before 11 o'clock tomorrow. So if you have an extra $10 or something you could donate, it would be wonderful. Thank you.
Yep. And thank you to Hope for Riverside, along with a number of other organizations, Grants of Classrooms. And I don't want to keep going because I'll leave folks out, but the work that group does to make sure that so many kids in our district have a backpack to start the school year with a ton of school supplies is a great thing. So thank you to Pastor Dan, obviously the school board, Chad, all those folks. It's a great thing. So school board on Old Harshman before 11, because at 11 we start packing.
Yep.
All right. Do we have a motion to adjourn at 7:15?
Second.
We have a motion from Mr. Joseph and a second from the deputy mayor to adjourn at 7:15. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed, say nay. Adjourned.